just began to realize that everyone was dressing up and that most people weren't dressing up as the thing that they wanted to dress up as. And that's what made them unhappy. From a young age, I prevented my parents from purchasing clothes for me. They had such horrible taste. And I started to assemble my own outfits, and they were so flagrant and so gay. I was like, we're not going to talk about that.
Alok is an internationally acclaimed and award-winning poet, writer, comedian, public speaker, actor, and style icon. They're known for the Netflix special Gender Agenda, HBO's Sex Lives of College Girls, and their new comedy special, Biology, executive produced by comedy legend Christopher Guest, which is out now.
I'm just really trying to live my life outside of stories, which is funny because professionally
You're a storyteller.
Yeah, I found myself doubting my own magic, afraid of what I had to say. We have to actually see anxiety and fear as vital components of the beautiful song of our lives.
Yes!
Pettiness and hatred, they're bridges to walk out of our own problems into someone else's for a second.
And you're blowing my mind! Sorry, this is like a therapy session. I love it.
That time that we waste hating and being petty is spent to creating a world that is more beautiful for everyone. So therefore, healing myself is helping to heal the world. All of the negativity, the vitriol, the darkness, thank you so much for a lifetime of comedic material. Comedy was never meant to be safe.
No, it's supposed to be dangerous.
Yes,
I love it.
exactly.
I love talking. This is the shit I love talking about. Yes.
It's a whole nother level. A whole nother level. A whole nother level.
Alok, I am so honored that you're here. I was always so inspired by your wisdom. It felt like ancient wisdom, your beauty, your light. And one of my makeup artists who, Becca, I think so she worked with you in Australia, and she's like, oh my God, Alok. And we were just going on and on about, like, this is like a year and a half ago. We filmed a Christmas movie, and we were just obsessed, being like, oh my God, Alok. And then I had this project that I had written years ago that now an Oscar-winning director has like taken on, but one of the characters was funny enough, was like very much like you. And then I saw you and I was just like, oh my God, like we have to get Alok for our project, for our short. And so then I met you, and then you've just been killing it. You started off just being a poet, a comedian. You've done TED Talks. You were on Netflix. Netflix is a joke. You've been on HBO shows, Sex Lives of College Girls, and the sort of in Random Acts of Flyness on HBO. And you also did a docu-series short where you opened up Sundance with Jodie Foster. I mean, it's amazing. It's also been a year. It's been a year. So I want to get into just all of it with you, just, you know, what's been happening with you this year? Like, what is the growth and the lessons and what's been going on? How are you?
Well, I'm feeling blue.
Oh my God. That was the name of our character,
Yes,
Blue. And so
I wore this shirt for you.
I know in the eyes. I'm so obsessed.
And I think blue doesn't have to mean sadness.
Yeah.
Because there is no new water, right?
Mm-hmm.
Water is recycled and replenished and in everything.
Mm-hmm.
So to feel blue is to feel everything, because water finds a way to creep its way into it. I guess, you know, it's been a very difficult year and a very gorgeous year, a very spectacular year and a very subtle year. There's been a lot of quiet intimacy and long yawns and a lot of loud noise and flashing cameras. And I suppose I am always trying to figure out a way how to hold both, because people always seem to think that one cancels out the other. And I think that's so cruel. If we only have people who are there for the moments that we're like triumphant and not the moments we're also sad, then that's not real.
It is so true. I mean, fuck, I've gone through a year myself, and I think there's always polarity. There's always, oh my God, there was this, I mean, I wrote down so many things that I wanted to talk about, but you Funny enough, you said a quote which was, "Life is terrifying and beautiful." And funny, there was this Instagram post that I did years and years and years ago that Christy Campo, my co-writer, where there was like a really crazy situation that happened, but she was like, "Life is terrifying, mysterious, and brilliantly beautiful," which was literally almost like identical to what you had said. So that it just feels very kismet. And so when I think about like the moments this year have been a lot of, the balance of these two polar opposites that sometimes can happen simultaneously. And so what has been happening for you in those polarities? Like, because you've had some like really high highs. And so what are the lows like, and how have you been moving through those things? Because I'm definitely wanting to learn that for myself, because sometimes it's just so challenging. Your fears and your anxieties can kind of take a hold of you and feel like you're being strangled.
Yeah, I would actually say that that's the low, is the meanness within me to myself. The ways in which anxiety found a way to kind of appear in places I thought I was healed. Fears and places and doubts in places I thought were secure and fortified. I found myself doubting my own magic. I found myself afraid of what I had to say. And that was a strange place for me to be, because usually I feel a deep sense of security and rootedness. And I'm so grateful for those invitations to return to why I do the things that I do. Like any relationship, I think our relationship with ourselves requires us to continually check in and be like, why are you doing this? And to make that choice over and over again. I'm doing this because it's what I need to be doing. And if you can't say that, then maybe you shouldn't be doing the thing. And so I felt like I had to, at many points, especially in the latter half of this year, really ask myself, why am I doing this? This is so difficult. This is so hard. Why is this my cross to bear? Why can't it be easier? If I just lived some other life, if I looked some other way, then it would be easier. And I had to meditate on that, and I always chose this life and chose this body again and again. And each time, that decision comes quicker. So that's where the healing is. It's not the elimination of the anxiety and the fear and the doubt. It's the creation of a ritual so that when they appear, I can integrate them and be like, oh, it's you again. Okay.
Oh my God. Run away from yourself all the time. You think like it's so funny because this is kind of what's been happening in my life, where I think that I'm the master. I thought that I had mastered whatever. My sort of thing is like I had, a part of me had been in relationships that were very chaotic. And so I was a part of that equation. I chose the chaos. So then I had cleaned up all my relationships, like every part of me that was chaotic. And then somehow, like I had misjudged some situations and it brought, again, some chaos. And then I was like, damn it, not again. It got me again. Thinking that I had mastered it, and then realizing, it's like those things that you just have to, I guess, keep working on. It's always going to be like those flaws that will just be, it's like you're weaker in these points. Like for me, I was weaker in these points of, just being more willing and less discerning. Like in certain ways, I'm very discerning. And then in some ways I'm like, yeah, fuck it. Like, let's do, it'll all work out. And then it goes spectacularly awry. And it always does work out in the end. But then in the process of, this transformation, it's really tough. What has been the challenges for you? Like what, when you say you've just been kind of going through it where you thought that, also, again, you were the master and you you're like, oh, there I am again. And so what were those things that you were facing? And what were those challenges? Like what was so hard about your journey? You look so fabulous, by the way. I'm like loving the lip and eyes.
Thank you. So many things, but I suppose it's like narrative. I have stories of where I think I should be, stories of what I think the world should be at. And I have to contend with the fact that a story is a myth. there's an anarchy to the present. Everything refuses to be a story in the moment. We can tell it after the fact as a story.
It's so true.
But in the moment, it's just being, you know?
Yeah.
And so I kept on having these stories that were really essential for me for long parts of my life. Like, one story is, if I'm smart, I'm safe. And then that keeps on falling apart.
Right.
Or people are learning, growing, and healing, and will make the right decision around an election. And then that fell apart.
Right.
And so I just had to keep on noticing all of these stories that were kind of buoying me, falling apart, and feeling like pillars were kind of gone. And what I always have to remember then is that I'm always looking, anxiety is looking to draft another story, to take that place. But I actually want to get to a place where I don't need to have a narrative. Narratives, synonym leashes, they hold us to an expectation of what should be and don't allow for the easiness and ease of what is. And I guess I'm just really trying, and maybe it's a lifetime effort, to live my life outside of stories, which is funny because professionally
You're a
I'm a
storyteller.
Yeah. But personally, I don't think it works. I think actually it prevents me from showing up with wonder and curiosity and openness because I already have a plot in mind. I have a destination I'm seeking. I already have enlisted the characters. That's not what it means to live a life. I want to be continually surprised. I want every sort of jagged edges to be there. Like, there's no cutting room floor in a day. You just have to go through the day. There's no edit. You just have to show up. And so I think what I do, and maybe what you do, is like, because this is our job, we try to take the lessons from our job and apply them to our lives, but it doesn't work.
Yeah, well, you certainly get boxed into those things. And then you have this expectation of morality or ethics. And that's kind of what I've been coming up against, where it's like everyone has their own journey and their free will, you know? And so all we can do is sort of, we can guide or we can suggest and, you know, but we can't, no one can force anyone to do anything, you know? And so, and what I have found is like we are all parts of God. Like we are all parts of human consciousness, and some are further along than others. And sometimes you're like, damn it, why are you not here? Like, why are you not on this level? And, you know, and that can feel frustrating. And sometimes even with Christy, where sometimes I think she's further along, where she's like mastered certain things, just not being affected by her external world as much. And sometimes, like, you know, I'm very a passionate person, and sometimes I can get caught up in like the story and the, you know, and because I love the story. It's so fun, you know, tell the story. And you're like, oh, so this happened and ba 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 and boo 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 boo, you know, this whole story. And so a lot of my friends in life are very much like, there's a lot of story going on, you
same
know,
with my friends. And the stories for me populate like almost immediately.
right?
Like I'll just have one interaction. I've already created a protagonist. I've already created
The villain.
Yeah. And I've enlisted an entire ensemble
subplots.
cast. And it's like, actually, no, you know?
Yeah.
People are not characters,
Yeah.
and including us.
Yeah, I know. We're so much more than that.
So much more.
Yeah.
And the camera can't see what it can't, you know? Everything is defined by the medium with which we're trying to transcribe reality.
Yeah, totally.
And so sometimes I have to remind myself, I'm looking at my life as if I see reality, but I see Alok's perception of reality.
Yeah.
You know, it's just one grasp of something so much greater. And so the way that I sort of struggle as what anxiety means in my life is, don't sit with unknowability because that's terrifying. So create a story so that you have some sense of security. But with this greater knowing, which I think you're alluding to, of a higher self, is unknowability is the only truth. Actually,
It's so horrible. That's where the anxiety lives, in the unknowable. But it's also like our higher selves already know. We've already planned this story out for us to experience and overcome. And we're like, we've chosen these stories in this current life. And what I believe is like, before or when we're dead and we come back and we choose and map out, okay, well, I'm going to have this toxic, relationship and we're going to work things out, whatever that's like this karmic thing that, needs to be worked out, however that shakes out. But it's always like, I do believe that on some level that it's like, we've already chosen these stories and we've chosen them in life to like participate in and in all these ways. And so it's like, we're always choosing. We're literally, I love this quote of if you're not actively choosing, like I think it's, we're always choosing our reality no matter what, and we're definitely like, if we're not like accepting, or if we're accepting, we're choosing, I think, so what do you think about that? What do you think about that concept?
Well, reality is composed of the stories that we tell about it, what we choose to notice, and how we populate it. So what I found myself doing is, in one telling of this year, I could say there were a lot of disappointments. There's a lot of catastrophe. There's a lot of alarm and sadness and confusion. Okay, that's true. But in another telling of this story, I persisted. Why is it that the first story that's so easy for me to populate is the catastrophizing one? And whose interests does that serve? And I think that's where I've began to really doubt my reliability as a narrator sometimes, because I think that it's so much easier for me to believe and struggle and to notice struggle than to perceive ease. And so one of the mantras I've been telling myself recently is, it gets to be easy. I have this narrative that everything has to be difficult and onerous and impossible. And that's not true. That's a story that I've told about what is true. And so now what I'm trying to cultivate in myself is that kind of precognitive awareness of being like, is this reality or is this a story or a prism that I'm putting in through to reality?
Totally. Yeah, there's this meditation, Robert, who was also in the short that we did, that was Christy's husband. His sort of story had been for a while that like people are against him or people like that, sort of idea. And so he started to change the way he spoke about things, which is everyone like is my friend and everyone is rooting for me and everyone, he's a very passionate Italian and he's so wonderful and lovely. But I think that idea, we can all feel like, we're the underdog or the world is against, especially storytellers, because I think as artists, we feel a lot, and sometimes a lot of our experiences in life can feel really personal. Yeah. And it's usually 95%, it's not about you. Yeah. It's just people are, it's like other people's patterns are interacting with your patterns. Yes. And then sometimes there's calamity and chaos and, disaster, because you have two people's, maybe triggers and they trigger each other and then a bomb goes off, like a metaphorical, sense. And then it's like you said, you have to get curious and start exploring, because those are invitations to explore like, oh man, I thought I healed this. Well, there's more healing I have to do. And you're like, I've been dealing with this for 10 fucking years. And you're like, how am I still dealing with this? Or how am I at the effect of, this, my world sometimes. And it's just really interesting because even, it's like a series of events that people are experiencing their own life, and they're, probably not thinking about like whether that's like in relationships, like, there's some damage caused and it's more of like collateral damage, but it's like it wasn't intentional. It's more of this idea that I've learned recently in close relationships was and something that I learned just, I had made decisions earlier in my life to be in certain relationships that were really not healthy and that were pretty toxic, but I didn't know any better. So I was always going to enter into those relationships, and it was kind of like fate, because these family patterns, this like epigenetics of, it's like my dad's trauma and my mom's trauma met. And they bonded over somehow very subconsciously, because I don't think they ever talked about their trauma. And it was like severe. Like my dad was in like a collective farm concentration camp in Russia in World War II. And so he was a child who saw the worst atrocities possible, people murdered and as a child, and so never talked about it. And then my mom also had some abandonment issues and trauma, and then also a lot of people dying. She never talked about it. So you have two people who never really dealt with their trauma, and then lo and behold, those neuroses, like Carl Jung talks about, like the shadow. And so Carl Jung talks about the shadow, that whatever your parents haven't dealt with, it comes out in the offspring. So suddenly it was like neuroses is like, oh my God, I'm unsafe. I'm unsafe. Everything's unsafe. And, we were pretty well off. But it was interesting that those familial patterns sort of inform my life in making decisions, and whatever their trauma, they weren't able to be as present as parents and to be fully the best parents possible. So then that I made a story around it. And then I sought out relationships that I thought would be healing. And it was really, it was just another pendulum swing of the other toxic form of like that dynamic. And so I was always going to enter into these toxic relationships because of this family lineage that like goes back even beyond my parents. It's their grandparents and theirs. And so I think you talked about this also, that, and I've definitely really thought about this, about healing familial trauma. And then that's when you can stop everything. That's when, whatever, because it's like when I have kids, knock on wood, whenever that happens, I really didn't want to bring like any more of the same story. I'm sick of telling these stories that I've like really identified and seen from my family patterns and had to heal. But what was really interesting, the meditation that I kind of thought about, was I was always going to enter into these relationships, and I had to learn until I realized, oh my God, I don't need to be in those relationships. Like, this is not a part of the story I want to tell anymore. But you don't know what you don't know. And so then going back to this idea about other people, the same idea is they don't know. Like, they don't realize there's a whole other situation. But there was someone close to me who did something that was like, really, like, when I would speak to my friends about it, they would be like, wait, what? That's so crazy, and you would never, but I think this person had no idea that was not okay, and I mean, that's like, and that's a whole other thing, but I think like they just, they unfortunately, like, they just don't know what they don't know, and until like, and I can't force someone to see that. I can't force someone to be aware of it. It has to, they have a lot going on in their life. And I mean, it wasn't anything like super terrible, but it was pretty like, whoa, it's. So, and that was sort of a realization of having compassion, because people just, it's like, I appreciate the Bible, and I appreciate the forms of ancient stories. And so like when Jesus was like, they don't know, like they, please don't, like they don't know what they're doing, essentially, is like, and so I think the same thing is like, they don't know. Cause like it took me that realization of, oh my God, I didn't know any better being in these toxic relationships. And I had to learn to be like, oh my God, this is not okay. Like, I shouldn't have been in this relationship. And now I can make a different choice. I can make a better informed choice and have healthier relationships. And now I have really great, amazing, healthy relationships in my life. But it took me 15 years of wandering in this like, dark forest to like figure that out of like, where am I going? Where am I? There's no pathway. And, there isn't always like a path, but how do you manage like when you talk about, healing these familial traumas and everything, and how do you look at those things, and how did you heal in a lot of ways, and where do you think you still need healing?
First, I just want to receive the weight of what you were saying. It's like really deep and so true, and also a story.
Also a story.
Yeah. Yeah, and one telling of it, we could say we receive our parents' neuroses. But alongside it, we also receive our parents' wisdom.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
And tenacity and grit.
That's true.
And so many things that we might feel like are impossible in our lives, some ancestor a while back did something way harder so we can lean on that strength.
Like my dad, for instance, like going through, totally.
And so their resilience is also in us. And one of the things that I'm trying to figure out how to do is how to take inventory of all the intergenerational trauma, because it's there, but also inventory of all the intergenerational wonder, all the intergenerational curiosity, all the intergenerational love.
Oh my God, I love that.
Those things are all alongside it, you know?
That's so true.
So that, and then second, when I think about healing, I really try to complicate this idea that time is just one directional. So often in a lot of these conversations, it's like we inherit baggage from our parents. I think that's true. But I also think we can send love letters back up. And so when I'm healing myself, oftentimes I feel a sense of guilt of like, I have access to resources and awareness that people in the past didn't have. My grandfather was a refugee, and PTSD didn't exist as a diagnosis, right?
Yeah.
And so here I am able to read all these books about what PTSD is, how it passes, trauma, neurosis, even as a word. They didn't have any of this, right?
Yeah.
And so sometimes I feel this kind of guilt of being like, that's not fair. Like, why do I get all of this stuff when they could have just used a breathing exercise back then, you know? But then I remind myself, actually, like, no. Me healing is not a selfish act. It actually is energetically shifting something that's going to reach him too. It's going to go backwards too. Because I don't think time is just one direction. I think time is actually in multiple spheres moving, multiple orbits moving.
I love talking to you. This is the shit I love talking about. Yes.
Yeah.
It's true. It's true. I believe that too. There is no time.
Yeah. And so a lot of times I feel this knee-jerk reaction I have around like, is prioritizing my healing selfish when I could be doing all these other things? And then I'm like, actually, me becoming the freest and fullest version of myself is going to send like a tuning fork, a frequency into the world that's going to have consequences far beyond what I can imagine, right? If we show up as our healed selves, anger, resentment, maybe when I'm saying anger here, I don't mean healthy anger. I mean retributive anger, vengeful anger.
Vengeful, 100%. Yeah. Petty.
Pettiness.
Like, you know what I mean? Like sometimes like someone flips you off, it's the same concept, and then you're just like, well, fuck you. Yeah. Like you just want to like right those wrongs. Like, petty. It's so petty.
Hatred, those things become obsolete when I'm healed. Because the charm of that is a short-term anesthetizing force, like an ointment that's like, ooh, you don't have to sit with your pain for a second because you're living in someone else's life. That's what it is. That's what pettiness and hatred are, is they're bridges to walk out of our own problems into someone else's for a second and make them responsible. We love complaining because then we don't have to take responsibility.
Oh my God, you're blowing my mind. You're blowing my mind. Sorry, this is like a therapy section. I love it.
When we heal, those knocks on the door of hatred become so much less tempting to us. And then that time that we waste hating and being petty is spent to creating a world that is more beautiful for everyone. So therefore, healing myself is helping to heal the world.
Yeah.
That's a false distinction. So when I think about healing from intergenerational trauma, I move past, I honor that sense of guilt of being like, this is so weird that I have access in ways to so many. I wish that my mom knew. I wish that my grandparents knew. I wish that this language existed. I wish I move past that. I feel that grief because I do think that this stuff really would have helped. Like my sort of Sistine Chapel mural is watching YouTube videos about new neural networks being created. The idea that our brains can continue to develop even when we're adults is one of the most beautiful ideas in the world to me.
Yeah.
Because it's so hopeful.
It is so hopeful.
We can literally reassemble the gray matter in our brain. That is so magnificent.
Yes.
And I wish I could tell that to my great-great-great-grandparents, that like who you thought you were can actually physically change.
Yeah.
And the way that it can change is through energy and how you're loving and being loved. But I can't. So I feel that grief of wishing that I could have all this knowledge to go back. And then I remind myself, like, time is working in such polyamorous ways. It is dibble-dabbling. It is dancing. It is ricocheting. It's reverberating. So who am I to say that this isn't going to have an impact on those people that I love too?
Do you believe in like separate timelines, like that you merge current you know, merge kind of the timeline kind of thing? I want it to not be such a battle where it's like the fight or flight sort of feeling of anxiety of like, well, where's the money going to come? And where's this? And how is this going to work out? And then also just your higher self knowing it's all good. Like, be in the present. You're so taken care of. You're totally okay. Like, and you're okay for several, like a year from now. Like, everything is okay. And so it's sort of this, you know, idea that I feel like our ancestors probably, I feel like this primal idea of when we were living in like cave land and, you know, hunter-gatherers, we needed to be constantly hypervigilant of threats. And so I feel like, you know, as we continue to evolve, this like sense of hypervigilance, like staying up kind of late and being like, is everything okay? Is everything, let me think about like all the anxieties that I need to worry about. It's sort of like, I imagine, I come from Vikings, like Rollo, the Viking king pirate. So there was a lot of like intense energy and, you know, probably worrying about like, you know, battle and attack. And so that hypervigilance has definitely, I think, been passed down through generations. And my mother, but she passed. And so, but she was, you know, very like anxiety ridden. And, but it's also like she was a force of nature. Like this woman like would run in a blizzard at 70 years old. Their car got stuck, her and her husband. And she ran like 3 to 5 miles home in a blizzard to get the other car. Like, and she's 70 in her little tennis skirt with just a jacket. Like, so it's like that same sort of neuroses and fight and flight, like can serve you in one way and then completely debilitate you. And like she, you know, would have a stock full of like Valium and this. She's like, oh, here, you want a pill? Like, and so it's like channeling those energies of, you know, and putting it in proper place. But sometimes what I have found is it can be like like literally probably this has just been my epigenetics of like, you know, the Viking and the battle, but that sense of hypervigilance and trying to, you know, put that energy in its rightful place and trying to constantly like, it's like kind of like Invisalign or braces where you have to keep like being like, no, I know you want to go over there. No, you want to go over there. Yep. You want to like worry about all the problems. And that's hypervigilance because now it's like there's no more like battle that I need to like fight someone, but now it's like just the internal battle, you know?
You're making me think of a new image I haven't thought about before, which is we have to like become like an orchestral conductor to all the emotions.
Oh, yes.
We have to actually see anxiety and fear as vital components of the beautiful song of our lives.
Oh my God, totally.
It's just sometimes we need to have a little bit crescendo, descendo. We need to be able to amplify this, diminish this. Because I really feel like for so long what I was trying to do was eliminate fear. I wanted to be fearless. And in so many ways, that's an adjective people give to me all the time. How are you so fearless? How are you doing these things? And I never will wish fearlessness on anyone because fear is there because something matters to us. I'm afraid because my life matters to me. I'm afraid because the people I love matter to me. And so fear is constantly showing me what matters. Even when I didn't know it, I didn't realize that I took advantage of something being there. But then fear is like, no, you might lose this. And then I'm like, oh, I actually love this.
Yeah.
Thank you, fear, for showing me that.
Yeah.
I don't want to eliminate fear. I don't want to eliminate anxiety. I don't want to eliminate sadness or depression. What I want them to do is to be part of the larger medley of everything. And I think where it gets hard for me is when they dominate.
Yeah.
Whenever there's no space, sonically or otherwise, for any other way of relating.
Yeah. When you talk about like life is terrifying and beautiful, and I think, when we were talking about polarity, how does that make sense for you? Because also you're a stand-up comedian. You're hilarious. Like your job is being aware, being like reading the room really well, and always knowing your audience, and always just being adept at adjusting and just being aware culturally of where we are in the world. And how, like, I know that's kind of like also a story that it's beautiful and terrifying, but I do think those things are like, that's polarity. Like it is like, it's like, oh my God, but it's also the fear of losing something, but also it's so exquisitely beautiful at the same time. I love life. But sometimes I'm like, man, this realm is fucking hard and it's fucking fucked up. And, but then you get these like moments of just pure amazing bliss that you're like, I can't believe this is my life. It's amazing. I'm sure you probably have such, right?
Did you just describe like 2 to 4 p.m. in my day?
What happened? Oh my God, what happened?
Yeah. I'm just saying in general, like that's how I experience life so full throttle.
Same.
Like everything is so deeply, deeply felt. And sometimes people will say to me like, is it too much? And I'm like, I would never want to live life another way.
Yeah.
Like I experience the full course of every emotion, and I'm so full of it. Here's the thing. My favorite things to joke about are the hardest things I've ever gone through in my life, because comedy is the only thing that can rescue me from the kind of quagmire of depression, the morass of it when I'm sinking in it. When I think about what is that dark joke that recognizes that I have no power to change this thing, but what I do have is the ability to laugh in the face of it. And so what inspired me to be a comedian was, of course, my desire to bring delight to the masses, of course, but also a way of showing what has been actually a very intimate survival practice for me, which is all of the negativity, the vitriol, the darkness. Thank you so much for a lifetime of comedic material. You are just making me stronger. What comedy allows us to do is to enfold all of the horrible things, alchemize it, make it lose its teeth, and feel even bigger and more beautiful. And that's how I began doing comedy, was just making jokes in my own life and starting to realize there was a wisdom to this. How, when everything is so bad, go to any funeral, and it's often the one joke, the first one that's made at the funeral, that allows people the space to cry even deeper after it. I just think that there's this cultural practice of taking levity and severity and thinking that they're oppositional. But I actually think that they are so braided.
Yeah.
And I think comedy and drama are so braided.
100%.
And these are all false binaries. It's just difficult when often the industry of comedy that's been created is very much one of escapism.
Yeah.
Of like, let's just talk about nothing because that's safer. And comedy was never meant to be safe.
No, it's supposed to be dangerous. I love it. I mean, you have the court jester going in front of the king and being like, hey, so remember that time you killed a bunch of people? Hey,
exactly.
Remember all the bodies are buried in your backyard? Hey, how you doing? Like, it's,
exactly.
And then you're like, oh, but these are just jokes. Don't kill me. And then the king goes, that's so funny. It's so true. Oh, all those bodies.
Exactly.
And so I think, I mean, that's what I love about comedy is the absurdity and the danger of, being inappropriate and, saying the wrong thing and trying to figure out where that line is and, and saying the truth. Because, I mean, I think the truth is definitely interwoven into, like, I love the storytelling aspect of comedy. Like when that's like, I love your comedy because it's so storytelling and it feels like it hits me and it resonates and, and
But
everyone's.
what's interesting is that I find that some of the best comedy being created today is by women and trans people because we are not afraid to be vulnerable about why we need to laugh. A lot of us come to comedy from a place of losing a parent, losing a piece of ourselves, from deep pain. And we have to be able to say that quiet part out loud. I'm in pain. But a lot of contemporary masculinist comedy is I'm the GOAT, I'm the greatest, I am invincible, I am invulnerable, you can't reach me, I'm a shield. And that's not compelling to me. I actually really find woundedness to be the most honest way to exist in the world. I come with my wounds and you come with yours, and let's tell them like Boy Scout badges.
Yeah.
Tell the stories of your life. And that's where I make comedy from, is not as a way to pretend that those aren't there.
Yeah.
Or to sheen over or gloss over how difficult my life has been. But then also not to indulge them just as pain, because there is that beauty piece alongside it. So I have my first comedy special coming out next week, actually.
With Christopher Guest,
Yeah.
who is executive producing.
Totally.
I'm so
Yeah.
excited for you. If you don't know, Christopher Guest directed and wrote like Spinal Tap and Best in Show. I mean, married to Jamie Lee Curtis, shout out. I mean, you've just have like amazing people surrounding you. It's
He's
awesome.
been so helpful. And one of the things that we spoke a lot about is in this show, what I do is I weave out of comedy and poetry, and I don't tell you when I'm doing what. And that's part of the comedy.
I love that.
Because what I'm trying to actually be honest about is that's what a life is. There's no preparation. Someone you love dies. Everything you thought was fixed isn't. And what I try to do in this show was my hypothesis was, in a world where we're so dissociated from our bodies, laughter is often the first point of entry back into them. But then once we get people laughing, what do we do with that?
Right.
What's the point? There has to be an ethics there of, okay, we're in a dissociated world where we're usually brought together out of fear and a common enemy. But what a comedy crowd is brought together out of delight and a recalibration of our bodies to be like, oh, we can guffaw together.
Yeah.
We can sneeze together.
Yeah.
Now, what are the ethics of that? Now that I have you here. And so what I did in the show is we're all having fun, and then it's a poem about someone I love dying. Or we're all having fun, and then it's a poem about someone committing suicide when I'm on a subway train and having to sit with that. And what I was trying to do stylistically in that show was to actually say, this is where my comedy comes from. And I'm showing you the transcript. My comedy's not coming from because I want to be seen as clever or smart or playing with words. I'm coming because there's so much pain and darkness in the world. And if we can't say that as comedians, I worry that we're losing touch with why we're doing this. It's like we're inheriting broken rooms with broken people dealing with so much grief. And so comedy is a grief ritual for me, first and foremost. And every time something hard goes on, I sit with it and I'm like, okay, how can this joke that I'm going to create allow me to live with that grief?
That's so incredible. Yeah, I relate to that so much because the stories that I told, well, first of all, Grief Looks Good on You that you were in was dealing with my complicated relationship with my mom, who I love very much, who was a best friend, but still, like, she wasn't a perfect person. In a lot of ways, she was such a beautiful, like, dynamic powerhouse of a woman in so many ways. But yeah, the Grief Looks Good on You was inviting the grief in and alchemizing. So I was like, okay, I thought my heart was going to stop. I felt like I was going to die. And then how can I transmute this pain? And I think you talk a lot about transmuting the pain and, instead of, you said like indulging in the pain or, you transmute it. And that's exactly what I was, and it's so kismet that you were a part of it and in the stories that you're telling. And, I feel like this short that we did was an extension of that, of just like looking at it in all the ways and having it kind of be like a Sex in the City meets The Bear meets like, so there's all these different levels of just sheer fucking ripping your heart out pain. But then our scene was just really like kind of manic. Like I was manic and hilarious, you know, and like you were just providing, which is what you always do. You blow my mind when I was sitting there with you and you were just
freezing our asses.
Freezing our. Okay, by the way, you were amazing. You were just so chill. I like literally wrote that down in my notes of just how like just cool and chill. And my God, you were just like amazing. And I was just like, "Are you okay? Can I do anything for you? Can I make sure?" And it was just, it was so cold. But yeah, how
but
do you?
I just feel like that's the best art in the world.
Yeah.
The best art in the world is like it's everything all at once.
It's everything all at once.
You know?
By the way, I love that movie.
Oh, obsessed.
So obsessed. But how do you transmute and alchemize? So this crazy year that you've had, when you have these moments, and obviously you're putting this into your comedy. So how do you transmute these stories? So I know we also talked about when we were working together that, you know, because you're such a force in the world and such a dynamic, like huge voice, you know, in the LGBTQ community, like really, for real, everyone knows, like your household name. And I think we talked about this, that, you know, you sometimes you can get fearful because you've done so many amazing things. And, you know, I think there's still so much further for you to go. And sometimes you're like, I don't know, like we were talking about, you're like, I don't know if I can, like that feels really scary for me. And, you know, so I wanted to talk about alchemizing and like how you alchemize, and do you still feel that way? Is it still, because obviously you do love your life and this does mean something to me, to you, and it is beautiful.
How do I alchemize? I make art.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I forget that that's the most successful healing strategy that I have every time anxiety knocks. I'm like, what do I do? And then eventually I realize like, oh, that's why you're an artist.
Yeah.
I make art, and my working definition for art is making something with my hands that I can't recognize with my eyes. I have to become a vessel to something. And so when I'm taking doubt, I write about doubt. When I'm fear, I write about fear. And then I see what happens on the other side, and there's always an answer there. And I feel very blessed because I know very clearly that the reason I was put on this earth is to create art, because every time I do it, there's possibility there on the other side.
Yeah.
And that's why it really frustrates me, you know, slashing arts funding and making it so difficult and untenable for people to be artists, because it's a calculation.
Yeah.
How do you keep people stuck in despair, calcified in grief, and enfolded in trauma? You dispossess them of a creative outlet. You make it increasingly hard and, in fact, dangerous to feel out loud. Because when we feel out loud, then we realize that, oh, these things that felt so deeply personal to me, intimate to me, they're deeply felt by everyone. And so then I'm not alone. So I'd say I make art. And then I think the second thing I do is I take the piss at myself, which I see as an extremely fundamental human right.
I totally agree.
If we take ourselves seriously, we've lost.
Yeah.
We have to always take the piss at ourselves.
Totally. I totally agree.
And I feel like humorlessness is the death knell of any social movement. And I find that so often when people come to my shows, they're like, oh, I feel so relaxed because I just feel so sensitive about getting it wrong, misgendering you, saying the wrong thing. And I'm like, that's so funny. You know, let's actually talk about it. It's funny.
Yeah.
And I think it's so devastating to me that the cultural perception of trans people is that we're hyper-politically correct, have no humor, always want to be traumatized and aggrieved. When, in fact, I found trans people to be some of the funniest people I've ever met in my life.
100%, yeah.
And so we've learned how to spin jokes off of really difficult situations. And so I think humor is the best way, because I'll just be like in my melancholy, walking on the street, like wind, tears. And then I'm like, this is so cliche. And then I laugh at myself. And then that's what allows the alchemy to proceed.
Yeah.
Because if I just went in being like, I'm going to deep breath my way to healing, it wouldn't work. I have to be able to joke about the deep breath and how feeble that feels amidst everything horrible in the world.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. You know what's really interesting? I think, because you were making me think of this idea that the vast majority of the world is lulled to a sleep, right? And so, like, the people who are in power, the trillionaire, billionaire vampires, who kind of like own the monopoly of all the different facets of life. What's really interesting is I don't think no one really cares who gets elected as long as they just stay in power and no one's looking and pointing the fingers of like, don't look behind the curtain, like the Oz figure, And so what's really interesting about that is like, people, the majority of people are lulled to a sleep because they're supposed to be in fear, and they're constantly injecting fear of look at this, and being like, oh no, like CNN, Fox News, like whatever that is, of whatever you watch, it's just trying to get you in a state of fear and forget your God-given divine nature of we are a part of God and we are all, equal, and we are all like the human consciousness existence. And so we forget, our own power. And so people stay scared. What do we do? What do we do? Let's give our power away to somebody else who can help us like get out of this. And, those people are bought and sold by whatever. And they're, it's like, I feel, it's all kind of these power grabs of, oh, come, it's like a cult thing of, oh, come here, my child, I'll take care of you, So I feel I've had like a version of that when I was growing up. So now I kind of see in the larger sense. So it's like if we just recognized, and what you're saying is like to get people connected back to themselves, to be in their bodies, so they're not being dissociated and they're not being like, in a state of fight or flight. Because I know when I've gone through so much trauma, you can't even be present. Yeah. You're just like, oh my God, the sky's falling, the fires are happening, which is like, the fires are happening again right now, currently, but in Malibu. Shout out to my friends. I hope they're safe. I hope they're okay. But I think it's really interesting to have people to have them, to give them permission to not, stay in fear and to remember their own power and their own agency. And, I feel like that's a big component to your comedy and to what you do and how you transmute things. And, it speaks to when I saw one of your posts about, the younger version of you as a kid. And, I think you had posted that you tried to, commit suicide. And like, I mean, I've definitely had my fair share of like really like dark places. And so I know it well, where it's like you feel like you have no out. And you said that art was a thing. And so like that was your storytelling moment of comedy and levity. And that's always been the same for me too. How did you start realizing that was your calling in that moment? Like, how did you get to that low point, and how did you get yourself out of it?
Stay tuned for the memoir.
Yes.
But short term, I think the first art practice I had was fashion. So before I could write anything.
That was also my next question.
I could style an outfit.
Yeah.
And what I was learning was that all authority was play. Because I could just dress up as something and then become it. Everyone was wearing a costume. And that made the people who were bullying me so human, because they were just humans dressing up as bullies. And so I just began to realize that everyone was dressing up, and that most people weren't dressing up as the thing that they wanted to dress up as. And that's what made them unhappy. And so I just started to dress myself. So from a young age, I prevented my parents from purchasing clothes for me. They had such horrible taste. And I started to assemble my own outfits, concoct them like recipes. And they were so flagrant and so gay.
I love it.
But I was like, we're not going to talk about that. And I would just walk outside and I'd wear these outfits and people would look at me like, what? What are you doing? Sometimes I would just like shave half of my beard. Just why not? I would just try out different things, because what I was learning was I was learning how to experiment with freedom, how to own my own body.
I love that.
And then from style, I realized that there was a beauty in disobeying the rules.
Love that too.
And that led me to poetry, which is the art form where there are no rules except for beauty. And so then I started to just write poems. And then the poems were so serious, so I began to make fun of myself for being so serious, and that led me to jokes. And then when I was on stage just making jokes, I was like, oh, I'm kind of putting on a character, which led me to acting.
Yeah.
And then each thing is going to get me to the next thing. And all of them are necessary. So when people always ask me, look, what are you? Are you a, and they want me to choose one, I'm like,
I can't
would you tell a sunset to choose one color?
No way.
That is so cruel. I'm all of these things.
I love that. What is the best piece of advice you've ever gotten? What would you actually, no, hold on. Let me table that for a quick second. What would you give advice to your younger self? Like now, how would 12-year-old you see yourself now? And would that just be like, oh my God, how cool is that? And
I think at 12, I had internalized a lot of shit. So I would have been like, ew. I would have tried to distance myself and be like, I'm not like that, which is just a confession by another name. I think my advice to my younger self would be, there's going to be many, 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 many people who are threatened by who you are and what you're saying. But they were too afraid to say out loud, I'm intimidated by you.
yeah,
So they're going to try to make you feel small and invert your entire reality, as if you're the problem, as if you are the enemy, as if you're the villain.
and that's always their own stuff.
And that's always about them.
Yep.
And so just remember that many, many, many people are so triggered, but can't even use that word triggered, so sad, but don't even know how to say it, and love them.
Yeah. I love that. That's so beautiful. And what's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten?
Once there was an energy healer I worked with before a show who had me repeat to them, I am replaceable. And I was like, whoa, that is so gnarly. She was like, you have this narrative that like, if you don't do the thing, no one will come in and do it. You have to trust that the universe will reassemble itself to fill that gap, and practice that constitutive humility of being like, I'm part of something so much greater.
Yeah.
So if I need to tap out,
Yeah.
I can. So I think that advice was really helpful to me, because sometimes I feel like I have to do all the things.
Yeah.
And now I'm learning like I get to peel back.
Yeah. Yeah. Wait. And so when you're saying, I am replaceable. So like you're saying that the universe will get out of its way to make room for the things that you want, or for the things that aren't working?
What I'm saying is, if I can't do something, I can just say no, and then universe will create something else that will fill the space of my no.
That's amazing. Yeah. Do you feel like you have to like please sometimes to say yes, or?
I feel urgency often.
Yeah.
I feel a sense of like things are so despicable and bad. So I have to really like valiantly show up, even if I am sick or tired or can't. So I've pushed myself way too hard so many times. And I think as I get older, I'm trying to learn how to be like, no,
Yeah.
I can't deplete myself while delighting other people.
Yeah. Yeah. Boundaries and like self-love has just been always, it's been really interesting for me to definitely learn that too, of wanting to, just, especially because I think like you are a source of light for so many people, and probably you are a leader in a lot of ways. So I'm sure a lot of people are looking towards you for that wisdom, or that, how should I do this? Like, who are also non-binary or trans, and you're like, this is, new territory. How do you navigate these waters? It's sort of, there isn't a playbook for life, and there certainly isn't a playbook. It depends on but not really of here's how you should do this. You
Yeah.
get like sort of metaphors in life and
But
all
that's
these.
comedy. It's just when you begin to realize it's all a comedic bit
Yeah.
and we're just riffing. That's what life is.
And we're all
Just-
playing characters in certain outfits, like the police. I'm like, wait. Your joke with that's so amazing that I really love was straight cis men. What were you saying about like they're all acting, or we're all doing like a bit, we're all playing. I forget the bit.
I forget my own jokes all the time, so I'm sure it was very funny, super unique and interesting.
It was.
I have to head out.
Yeah, Alok, thank you so much for your time. This is amazing, and
Thank you
dropping
for
all
having me.
This is all the wisdom that you always bring, and the light and the levity. Thank you so much, and be sure to see Alok. And where can we see you?
Watch my new special. It's on my website
Oh my
from
God,
December
amazing.
18th on.
I can't wait. Okay, sounds good. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
A whole nother level.